On Target Institute presents a teaching from the Men on Target small group curriculum. Now with today's session, On Target founder Vince D'Acchioli.
Men, how you doing? And welcome to Module 4, Session 25. Now, as always, I need to remind you to go to otm.co and please download the handouts for this session and really for the next 4, because these sessions really are perhaps the most profound sessions and the most profound teaching we've ever had in the history of our ministry, and you're going to see why here in just a moment. Session 25, the title, Facing Trials, Part 1. I came across this some time ago, and I wanted to kind of kick this off by sharing it with you. It's something that I read. It goes like this: only God can turn, now watch this, only God can turn a mess into a message, a test into a testimony, a trial into a triumph, and a victim into a victor. I'll be reminding you of that as we move through this material, because it's very important, because only our God can do these things. Our God is so awesome. I want to share a verse with you before we get into this that kind of is interesting. I'd never seen this verse in the Bible before, but it was especially meaningful to me as I was working through some trials in my own life. And the verse is found in Judges 3:2. Prior to this point in Judges, it describes a bunch of battles that the nation of Israel had entered into. And at this point, he did this, in other words, God did this only to teach warfare to the descendants of the Israelites who had not had previous battle experience. In other words, the idea that God did this or allowed this in order to teach warfare to the nation of Israel, that's the same thing God does, guys, in our life. Sometimes the trials that come along is his way of teaching us and toughening us up for maybe life and trials that are yet to come. We need to understand that. In December of 2008, the Lord gave me a word. As I was in prayer, praying about this next season of our life and moving into this next year, he gave me 5 words. And he said, my people, I'll never forget this, my people, meaning you and I, are not prepared. It wasn't long after that word, by the way, that we had the big financial crunch in our nation. And I remember people really struggling to try to figure out how are we going to make it through this trial and through this struggle. Someone once said that, trials in life do not make a person, they reveal them. And that certainly happened when that financial crunch hit. And it was another indicator that his people, you and I, sometimes we're not really as prepared as we think we are. Well, what this word from God meant for my life was really incredible. I thought maybe the word were for other people, but I was soon to discover that word really applied to me. Let me tell you what happened. We ended up going into a business as a ministry back in those days. It was called The Place. We put all of our resources into it. We loaned a lot of money to the ministry to be able to go through this whole enterprise, and it failed miserably, and we lost everything. It wasn't long after that. Cindy's mom lived with us for 20 years. She was an incredible, dear lady. She had just passed away. A couple of my wife's friends had passed away. And then a devastating thing hit our family. Baby L, little baby L was a pregnancy. My daughter was into her 9th month. In fact, it was a day before baby L was to be delivered by C-section that baby tragically died in the womb. And that just devastated our family. Well, as a result of that, many of the doctors think that Cindy, my wife, was very vulnerable physically. And what happened is she contracted what we think was H1N1 double pneumonia. That was in the later part of 2009. We ended up taking her to the hospital, and she went right into ICU, the intensive care unit. And the doctor told us that had we not brought her into the hospital that night, she probably would not have survived. Guys, that started a 4.5-month journey where she was in a coma most of the time. And I'll never forget the date, Super Bowl Sunday, 2010. On that day, I was coming home from a trip. I went through the hospital, which was my custom every day. And that was when the doctors took me aside and said, I don't believe that your wife has any chance of making it. In fact, we got together as a team of doctors and we've determined that there is no medical way that your wife can possibly survive. There was zero chance of survival. Well, you can imagine what that did to me. Well, there were 6 things that God taught me through that trial that I want to share with you. And the first one has to do with what I call just faith. You know, look, it's one thing to get up, as I do often, and teach about this stuff. But it's another thing to how do you deal with it when it's hitting you. And I want to tell you something, guys. People, when you're going through tough stuff like this, other people are watching us. So these things are very, very incredible. And I really believe God wants you to really drill down on these. And I'm going to end on the 4th session what I've discovered I call the secret to life. So you're going to need to stay tuned for that. I'm not being cute or glib here. I'm being serious. I've discovered what I believe is the secret to life, and I can't wait to share it with you. So the first thing we had to come to terms with as a family is our faith. Do I really believe this stuff? You know, and so faith is very important for us to understand. And look, am I believing that God is going to end up really taking charge of this thing? And the other thing is, am I expecting? There's a difference, by the way, guys. A woman, for instance, can believe that she's going to become pregnant one day, but when that same woman is expecting, she buys the furniture. It's a whole different mindset. So am I believing that God is in control here? Am I expecting him to really show up? In fact, what happened is we ended up going out and actually remodeling a room and buying some furniture because we really believed and we expected she was going to come home and that she was going to be okay. So the other thing we had to come to terms with, by the way, is the question, why? Why? Lord, why would you allow this to happen? And I got to tell you guys, it's very, very often that we ask that question, but I want to throw a shot across the bow for you right now. You and I have no business asking God why. Now, why would I say that? Because I want to tell you something. If he really were to share why, I don't believe we could really handle it. We just need to have the kind of faith and confidence that God is in control, and the why, we don't need to know the why. Now, I didn't come to that right away. I had to kind of work through that. Hey, listen, if I were to ask for a show of hands, how many of you have ever been mad at God? Probably a lot of us have. And you know what I say about that? That's okay. God knows we're human and he can handle it. But at the end of the day, we need to understand we're not God. And God knows what he's doing. Do we have the faith and confidence to kind of leave it and let him have his way? So the first thing I want to share with you, and you've got a handout in front of you, and here's the fill-in words. Are you believing and are you expecting? Are you believing and expecting? In the midst of your struggle, in the midst of your trial, what I would ask you to do is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think you're doing in that area? Are you believing and are you expecting? The second thing, I'm driving to the hospital. And by the way, I just got to tell you this up front. I believe God lives in the backseat of my Avalanche, because the times I heard God the most clear, and tragically for many of us, the times we really do hear God is when we're really broken. The times I heard him the most clear were when I was driving to the hospital, that hour drive every day, just crying out to the Lord. On this particular day, I was whining. And by the way, I consider myself a professional whiner. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty good at whining. And in the middle of my whining, I felt like God tapped me on the shoulder and he said this. And I knew this had to be God, because I would have never said this to myself. God says, hey, Vince, do you think there's anything that you might be thankful for? And it was like, whoa. So I said, well, yes, Lord, but he wouldn't let me get away with the yes. He says, well, why don't you tell me what they are? So I ended up going through a list of things that I'm thankful for. I said, Lord, I'm so thankful for my wife. I'm so thankful for my children and my grandchildren. I'm so thankful for the things that you've brought us through. I even thanked him for some of the trials we went through prior and what we saw now that we've been through them and what they produced in our life. I said, Lord, I am thankful. Thank you so much. And you know what? I want to tell you something, guys. It is very difficult to whine and to go down a list of the things that you're thankful for. And I believe nothing pleases God more than when we go to Him in the midst of our trial and we say, Lord, I know this hurts. I know I'm in the middle of my trial, but I am so thankful for these things. I believe it blesses Him. So the second thing, do you have a thankful heart? Listen, in the midst of your struggle, ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, do you have a thankful heart? Now, what's the life implication for these first two? Here they are. Not believing God is in the midst of your struggle will cause me to question Him and seek answers on my own. Let me repeat that. Not believing God in the midst of my struggle will cause me to question Him and seek answers on my own. We'll unpack that a little bit more in these next sessions about how we tend to try to control everything. That is not a healthy thing for us to do. Now, life application. Here are your discussion questions. In the midst of your trial, on a scale of 1 to 10, we've already covered this, are you believing and are you expecting? Share that with the men in your group. If you're all by yourself, maybe talk to God. Search your heart. Let God search you and ask and see where you might be on that scale. And then the second thing is, do you have a thankful heart? In the midst of your struggle, and again, share this with the men around your table or in your group, do you really have a thankful heart, or do you tend to be one of those people that likes to just complain and whine all the time? Now, in our next session, we will start unpacking this whole idea of letting go of our way of doing things and coming to the end of ourself. I can't wait to unpack those things for you guys. And until next time, don't forget about it.